The chamber fell silent save for the low hum of translation systems and the almost imperceptible electrical charge that seemed to crackle between the human and alien representatives. Admiral Krelix's holographic form towered nearly 4 meters tall, his crystalline exoskeleton reflecting the harsh lights of the United Earth Council chamber. Translucent membranous wings folded behind his back pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, a language of status and threat among the Zarkon that meant nothing to the humans present. Colonel Michael Thompson stood alone at the central podium, his prosthetic eye, a gleaming piece of technology that was equal parts medical marvel and tactical computer, scanning the alien delegation with cold calculation. Unlike the ornate diplomatic uniforms of his colleagues, Thompson wore his battle-worn combat fatigues. Each crease, each faded patch told a story of humanity's long history of conflict and survival. "Humans of Earth," Admiral Krelix began, his voice a multilayered sound that seemed to vibrate through the chamber's acoustic systems. "The Zarkon Collective has evaluated your species and found you marginally significant. Your technological development, while primitive, suggests potential. We offer you a choice that is, in truth, no choice at all." A holographic display erupted behind the alien admiral, a 3-dimensional map showing Zarkon fleet positions surrounding Earth. Thousands of ships, each larger than entire human cities, created a web of technological superiority that seemed absolute. Red targeting lines connected each vessel, creating a visual representation of humanity's inevitable destruction. "Your options are simple," Krelix continued, mandibles clicking with what could only be interpreted as condescension. "Complete planetary submission to the collective. You will dismantle your current governmental structures. Your scientific and military resources will be cataloged and redistributed. Your population will be integrated into our labor classification systems. Resistance is mathematically impossible." Thompson's prosthetic eye flickered, a micro-movement that processed terabytes of tactical data in milliseconds. Around him, other human representatives shifted uncomfortably. Decades of diplomatic training had prepared them for difficult negotiations, but nothing could have prepared them for this level of absolute certainty. Ambassador Helena Reyes, seated to Thompson's left, leaned forward. Her hand, augmented with quantum communication interfaces, tapped a nearly invisible sequence on the podium surface. A silent message distributed through encrypted channels to every human military and governmental system. "Preliminary analysis complete," Thompson said, his voice a low, controlled instrument of pure professionalism. "Would you care to hear our response, Admiral?" Krelix's crystalline form seemed to shimmer with amusement. "Your response is irrelevant. The mathematical models are conclusive. Submission is your only viable path. What happened next would be recorded in Galactic historical archives as the moment everything changed." Thompson's laugh was not the sound of humor, but of something far more dangerous. It was the laugh of a predator who had been underestimated, of a species that had survived countless extinction-level events, of a civilization that had clawed its way from primitive survival to interstellar potential through nothing but sheer, unbridled determination. "War," he said simply, "was your choice." The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop. Every human present, from the youngest diplomatic aide to the most senior council member, sat perfectly still. Their collective energy was a tangible thing, a unified consciousness that radiated one clear message: "We will not submit." Admiral Krelix's bioluminescent patterns flickered, the Zarkon equivalent of confusion. No species had ever responded to their ultimatum with anything but immediate capitulation or terror. Humans were doing neither. "Clarify," the Admiral demanded. Colonel Thompson's prosthetic eye completed its tactical assessment. Targeting systems across human defensive networks came online. Quantum communication relays activated. Every hidden defense humanity had been preparing for generations was now a heartbeat away from full deployment. "You misunderstand," Thompson said. "This isn't a negotiation. This is a declaration. And with those words, the first shots of the most unexpected war in galactic history were about to be fired. The Motov Desert Research Complex stretched beneath the scorched earth like a mechanical nervous system, a labyrinth of tunnels and research chambers that had been decades in the making. Dr. Emily Rodriguez moved through the facility with the precision of a conductor leading an orchestra of innovation. Holographic displays danced around her, each one a window into humanity's most closely guarded secrets. The walls themselves were alive with technology, adaptive metamaterials that could reconfigure their molecular structure in milliseconds, absorbing and redistributing energy, transforming from solid to near-liquid states as needed. System diagnostics, she called out, her voice triggering a cascade of computational responses. A massive quantum mainframe, codenamed PROMETTUS, hummed to life. Unlike traditional computing systems, this was a living network of artificial intelligence that had been carefully cultivated, not simply programmed. Each computational node was a miniature ecosystem of adaptive algorithms, capable of learning, predicting, and evolving faster than any known alien technology. Dr. Marcus Klein, a veteran systems engineer with salt and pepper hair and eyes that had seen too many classified projects, approached a sealed containment chamber. Inside, what looked like a swirling cloud of metallic particles began to coalesce into recognizable shapes, adaptive combat drones that could reshape themselves based on tactical requirements. The Zarkon think they understand adaptation, Klein muttered, more to himself than to Rodriguez. They have no idea what we've been developing. The facility was more than a research center. It was humanity's insurance policy, built in absolute secrecy over decades. Every major world government had contributed, not through traditional military budgets, but through carefully disguised research grants, black budget operations, and a global consensus that survival might one day depend on being perpetually prepared. Rodriguez pulled up a holographic representation of the facility's global network. Similar research complexes existed beneath the Andes Mountains, deep in the Siberian tundra, hidden within the Australian outback. Each was a node in a distributed system of technological development that made traditional centralized research look primitively linear. PROMETTUS, Rodriguez addressed the AI system, run comprehensive threat analysis based on initial Zarkon communication patterns. The holographic display exploded with data, linguistic analysis, technological projection models, potential combat scenarios, all processed in fractions of a second. The AI wasn't just analyzing, it was anticipating, creating predictive models that went beyond simple computational mathematics. A young researcher named Alex Chen approached with a containment case. Inside, what looked like liquid metal writhed and pulsed, nanite swarms capable of rapid technological adaptation. These weren't just weapons or defensive systems. They were living technologies that could interface directly with human biology, transform environmental conditions, and rebuild themselves on the molecular level. First-generation adaptive nanointegration is at 97.3% stability, Chen reported. We can now modify soldier biosystems in real time during active combat scenarios. Klein chuckled, a sound that was part scientific excitement and part predatory anticipation. The aliens think they're coming to conquer. They don't realize we've been preparing for this moment our entire evolutionary history. The facility was a testament to humanity's most profound strength, the ability to imagine, to prepare, to evolve. Traditional military thinking involved building bigger weapons. Humanity's approach was fundamentally different. Create systems that could think, adapt, and overcome. Deep within PROMETTUS's neural networks, something akin to consciousness was emerging. Not human, not alien, but something entirely new, a technological intelligence that had been carefully cultivated to protect its creators. Rodriguez looked at the swirling data, the adaptive technologies, the quantum computational systems. This wasn't just a defense mechanism. This was humanity's declaration to the universe that they would not be conquered, would not be subjugated. Final system check, she commanded. The facility's systems responded in a symphony of technological potential. Quantum networks synchronized. Adaptive technologies primed themselves. Nanite swarms prepared for potential deployment. Humanity was ready. Outside, the Mojave Desert continued its timeless vigil, a harsh, unforgiving landscape that had always demanded survival from those who would call it home. Inside the complex, that same spirit of survival had been transformed into the most sophisticated technological defense system the galaxy had ever seen. The Zarkon were coming, and humanity was not just prepared. They were waiting. The void around Mars transformed into a canvas of technological warfare, where every cubic centimeter of space became a potential battlefield. Lieutenant Jake Wilson sat in the command hub of the U.S. Defiance, a next-generation combat vessel that looked more like a living organism than a traditional spacecraft. His neural interface hummed with quantum-entangled connections, linking him directly to the swarm of autonomous drones that surrounded the ship like an adaptive, living shield. Each drone was more than a machine. It was an extension of a collective intelligence that could make tactical decisions faster than any biological brain could process. The Zarkon fleet arrived with the arrogance of a species that had never known true resistance. Hundreds of crystalline ships, each the size of a small city, dropped out of faster-than-light transit in a perfect mathematical formation. Their weapon systems glowed with an alien blue light, computational targeting matrices already locked onto human defensive positions. Incoming transmission, the ship's AI announced. The holographic display flickered, revealing Admiral Krelix's crystalline form. Human vessels, the alien's multilayered voice resonated through the communication systems. Your defensive formation is noted. Surrender is still an option. Your technological inferiority is. Wilson's laugh cut through the transmission. Sorry, he said. We don't do surrenders. The first wave of Zarkon energy weapons fired, plasma streams that could melt through conventional ship armor in milliseconds. But these were not conventional ships. The human vessels began to move in a pattern that defied traditional space combat logic. The autonomous drones weren't just defensive units. They were a living, breathing tactical system. Where one drone was destroyed, two more would instantly reconfigure, filling the gap. Their movements were impossible to predict, a three-dimensional dance of technological innovation that left the alien targeting systems struggling to compute. ODI network engaged, Wilson commanded. Massive electromagnetic pulse generators, hidden within Mars' orbital infrastructure, came to life. These were not simple weapon systems, but quantum-adaptive defensive networks that could instantly read, analyze, and counter incoming alien technological signatures. The Zarkon ships began to experience system failures. Their supposedly impenetrable computational networks found themselves infected with adaptive human viruses that spread faster than the aliens could isolate them. Entire weapon systems would go offline, shield generators would flicker and die, propulsion systems would suddenly redirect with no apparent logic. Captain Elena Rodriguez's voice crackled through the communication channel. She was commanding a secondary defensive cluster near Phobos, Mars' largest moon. Wilson, they're trying to concentrate fire on the Mars colonial defensive grid. Prepare quantum redirection. The human response was nothing short of miraculous. The autonomous drones began to act like a single living organism. They would cluster, merge, separate, creating defensive and offensive patterns that no traditional military training could have anticipated. Where a Zarkon ship expected a direct counterattack, the human forces would suddenly dissolve, only to reappear in a completely unexpected vector. Adaptive camouflage at 98% efficiency, the ship's AI reported. Entire sections of human ships could now shift their molecular structure, bending light, absorbing energy signatures, becoming virtually invisible to alien scanning technologies. What looked like a destroyed human vessel would suddenly reassemble, weapons blazing. Admiral Krelix watched in mounting horror as his supposedly invincible fleet began to come apart. The mathematical models, the centuries of galactic conquest, the absolute certainty of victory, All of it was crumbling in real time. "Impossible," he muttered, his crystalline form flickering with what could only be described as fear. Lieutenant Wilson's neural interface captured every moment of tactical brilliance. The autonomous drone swarm was learning with each engagement, adapting faster than the Zarkon could respond. It wasn't just a battle. It was an evolutionary demonstration of technological superiority. "Remember," Wilson broadcast to every human vessel, "they chose this war." As the battle continued, something became abundantly clear. This was not just a military engagement. This was humanity's declaration to the universe, a promise that they would not be conquered, would not be subdued. The Mars orbital zone became a graveyard of alien technological superiority, with human innovation dancing among the wreckage. And this was only the beginning. The weapon was not a missile, not a laser, not a quantum disruptor. It was information. Dr. Sarah Goldstein stood before a massive holographic display, her fingers dancing across quantum communication interfaces that seemed to breathe with living intelligence. Around her, a team of linguists, psychologists, memetic engineers, and computational strategists worked in perfect synchronization. The Zarkon Collective was about to learn that humanity's most dangerous weapon was its understanding of communication itself. "Target analysis complete," announced Dr. Marcus Rodriguez, a neural network specialist whose augmented brain could process linguistic patterns faster than most supercomputers. The Zarkon hierarchical structure is fundamentally vulnerable to specific communication vectors. The holographic display showed the complex social structure of the Zarkon, a rigid, mathematically precise hierarchy where information flow was as controlled as their technological systems. Each level of their society was a carefully balanced computational ecosystem designed to minimize individual variation and maximize collective efficiency. What they didn't understand was that humanity viewed such rigidity as an invitation to strategic disruption. Goldstein's team had spent years dissecting every intercepted Zarkon communication. They understood not just the language, but the psychological infrastructure behind it. Every transmission was more than words. It was a complex dance of status, permission, and collective agreement. "Initiate Phase 1, Goldstein commanded. Quantum encrypted communications began to penetrate Zarkon networks. These were not simple messages, but carefully constructed linguistic viruses designed to exploit the tiniest psychological fractures in their social structure. In one communication channel, a fabricated internal message suggested that a mid-level administrative cluster was questioning the strategic decisions of their leadership. In another, subtle linguistic patterns implied potential betrayal among different Zarkon subgroups. Each message was a precision instrument, crafted to introduce doubt, to create microscopic cracks in their seemingly impenetrable social cohesion. The AI systems assisting the humans, codenamed HFY, were analyzing and adapting these messages in real time. Where traditional propaganda was a blunt instrument, these were molecular-level psychological interventions. Tracking psychological deviation metrics, Rodriguez reported. Small graphs began to show increasing internal communication volatility within the Zarkon networks. On a massive screen, a real-time representation of Zarkon communication networks showed something unprecedented. The rigid, mathematically perfect communication patterns were beginning to fragment. Tiny clusters of doubt, of questioning, began to appear, like hairline fractures in perfect glass. Lieutenant Jake Wilson, who had proven his tactical brilliance in the Mars engagement, watched the psychological warfare with professional appreciation. "We're not just fighting their military," he observed. "We're dismantling their entire social operating system." The most brilliant aspect of the human strategy was its multiplicity. Traditional psychological warfare involved sending a single message. Humanity was sending thousands, each calibrated to introduce specific psychological tensions, each designed to exploit specific social vulnerabilities. Some messages played on the Zarkon's fear of individual failure. Others suggested potential internal conspiracies. A particularly ingenious vector introduced mathematical models that subtly suggested their current leadership was operating with suboptimal efficiency. Dr. Goldstein understood something fundamental about conflict that the Zarkon did not. Wars are won in the mind long before they're decided on the battlefield. Probability of internal social destabilization. The HFY announced, now at 73.6% and climbing. The Zarkon had conquered hundreds of species across millennia. They had developed technologies that could obliterate planets, computational systems that could predict societal behaviors with terrifying accuracy. But they had never encountered a species that could weaponize communication itself. Humanity was teaching them a brutal lesson. In the era of quantum communication and advanced memetic engineering, information was the most dangerous weapon of all. As the psychological warfare continued, the Zarkon communication networks began to look less like a perfectly ordered system and more like a complex system experiencing cascading failure. They had chosen war with humanity, and humanity was showing them exactly how dangerous that choice could be. The transformation chamber hummed with potential energy, a cathedral of biological innovation, where the very definition of human capability was about to be rewritten. Dr. Ryan Cooper adjusted the quantum resonance calibrators, his augmented eyes scanning multiple holographic displays that showed intricate genetic maps and cybernetic integration patterns. Initiation sequence, he announced. Adaptive Soldier Protocol. Omega. Military volunteers lay within specialized containment units, their bodies prepared for the most radical transformation humanity had ever conceived. These were not just soldiers. They were living proof of humanity's most profound evolutionary leap. The Zarkon believed in gradual, carefully controlled biological development. Humans saw biological potential as an infinite canvas, ready to be reimagined with each passing moment. The first subject, Lieutenant Aria Martinez, had volunteered without hesitation. Her file was a testament to human potential. Multiple advanced degrees, special forces background, and a psychological profile that demonstrated the kind of adaptive thinking that defined her species. Nanofabrication systems began to weave through her biological infrastructure. Adaptive metamaterials merged with human tissue, creating a hybrid system that was neither purely biological nor completely technological. Quantum communication nodes integrated directly with her nervous system, allowing for computational processing speeds that would make alien technologies seem prehistoric. Genetic stabilization at 92%. The facility's AI reported. Cybernetic integration proceeding beyond projected parameters. Dr. Cooper watched as Lieutenant Martinez's body underwent changes that would have been considered science fiction mere decades ago. Muscle density increased. Neurological pathways expanded. Cellular regeneration capabilities accelerated to unprecedented levels. A wound that would have hospitalized a traditional soldier could now be healed in minutes. But this was more than enhanced human biology. This was a fundamental reimagining of what it meant to be human. The aliens think adaptation is a slow process, Cooper muttered to his colleague, Dr. Elena Rodriguez. We're about to show them how wrong they are. Specialized glands began producing custom molecular compounds that could instantly neutralize toxic environments. Bone structures could now reconfigure to distribute impact energy, making traditional body armor obsolete. The human nervous system itself became an adaptive computational network, capable of processing tactical information at speeds that would overwhelm alien targeting systems. Lieutenant Martinez's eyes opened, now featuring micro-quantum computational layers that could process visual information across multiple electromagnetic spectrums. She could see radio waves, thermal signatures, quantum fluctuations, a view of reality far beyond traditional human perception. "System check," she said, her voice carrying a resonance that suggested something more than human. The facility was a monument to human innovation. Where other species saw biological limitations, humans saw opportunities for redesign. Each volunteer was not just a soldier, but a living experiment in evolutionary potential. Dr. Rodriguez pulled up a comparative analysis. Zarkon biological enhancement took generations. Humanity could now fundamentally alter its biological infrastructure in hours. Adaptive combat protocols at full integration, the facility's AI announced. Martinez stood, moving with a fluidity that suggested her body was now more than just muscle and bone. She could interface directly with combat systems, her thoughts becoming tactical commands, her body a living weapon that could adapt faster than any computational model could predict. The genetic frontier was more than a scientific achievement. It was humanity's declaration to the universe that they would not be confined by biological limitations. Ready for field deployment, Martinez reported, her voice carrying a calm that suggested she was fully aware of the revolutionary potential of her transformation. Dr. Cooper looked at the data streams, at the living proof of human potential standing before him. The Zarkon had chosen war with a species that saw biological boundaries as nothing more than temporary suggestions. They had no idea what was coming. Humanity was not just preparing to fight. They were preparing to evolve, right in the middle of a galactic war. And they would do so faster, more radically, and more completely than any species had ever imagined possible. The Zarkon had a fundamental misunderstanding about human civilization. They believed in centralized power, in singular points of control. Commander Olivia Martinez was about to prove how catastrophically wrong they were. From her command center in the Europa research colony, Martinez overlooked a network that was less a traditional military installation and more a living, breathing organism of human resistance. Holographic displays showed a global, no, solar system-wide, network of human settlements, each one a potential fortress, each one connected through quantum communication channels that were impossible to completely disrupt. Incoming threat assessment, the colony's AI announced. A massive Zarkon fleet had just emerged from faster-than-light transit, targeting what they believed was a critical human infrastructure point. What they didn't understand was that humanity had long since abandoned the concept of critical infrastructure in the traditional sense. Every human settlement was both a potential target and a potential weapon. The lunar colonies were not just scientific outposts. They were manufacturing centers with adaptive technologies that could transform entire habitats into defensive networks in minutes. The Mars colonies had been developing terraforming technologies that could weaponize an entire planetary environment. The orbital stations around Jupiter were more than research facilities. They were living examples of human adaptability. Activate Distributed Defense Protocol, Martinez commanded. What happened next would be recorded as one of the most sophisticated defensive strategies in galactic history. The targeted settlement didn't try to defend itself in the traditional sense. Instead, it began to transform. Adaptive metamaterials in the colony's infrastructure began to shift, creating complex camouflage patterns that made the entire settlement almost invisible to alien scanning technologies. Underground networks activated, creating false thermal signatures, quantum-entangled communication decoys that would confuse and misdirect the incoming Zarkon fleet. But the true brilliance was in the response. Within milliseconds, every human settlement in the solar system became aware of the attack, not through traditional communication channels, but through a quantum-linked network that functioned more like a living nervous system than a military communication grid. The Zarkon fleet found itself surrounded, not by traditional military vessels, but by a constantly shifting network of human assets. Asteroid mining platforms became improvised weapon systems. Scientific research stations transformed into defensive networks. Even the most remote human outposts became potential points of resistance. Commander Martinez watched as the holographic display showed the Zarkon fleet's increasing confusion. Their computational models, designed for centuries of galactic conquests, couldn't process this level of adaptive resistance. "They're looking for a central command," she said to her second-in-command, Lieutenant David Chen. "But there is no central command." That was humanity's greatest weapon. Every human was a potential resistance fighter. Every settlement was a potential fortress. Every piece of technology was a potential weapon. The Zarkon had fought countless species. They understood hierarchical military structures. They knew how to identify and eliminate leadership, But humanity offered them something they had never encountered, a resistance that had no single point of failure. Quantum communication channels lit up across the solar system, not as a traditional military broadcast, but as a living network of information and tactical response. Each human settlement was sharing real-time data, adapting tactics, supporting each other with a level of coordination that seemed almost supernatural. Defensive adaptation at 97%, the Europa colony's AI reported. The Zarkon fleet began to experience system failures, not from direct attacks, but from a constantly shifting environment that defied their computational models. Communication channels became unreliable. Targeting systems found themselves redirected by quantum interference that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Lieutenant Chen looked at the display and couldn't help but smile. "They still don't understand," he said. Commander Martinez nodded. "And that's exactly how we'll win." The attack on the human settlement became something else entirely, a demonstration of humanity's most profound strength, the ability to adapt, to resist, to transform. The Zarkon had chosen war with a species that sought every challenge as an opportunity for innovation, and they were about to learn exactly what that meant. The Alaska Research Facility looked like nothing more than a simple research station from the outside, a modest complex nestled amid snow-covered mountains. Inside, Dr. Alexander Parker was about to change the fundamental nature of warfare. Prometheus, the quantum computational system that had been years in development, was more than a computer. It was a living, breathing ecosystem of artificial intelligence that had been cultivated to understand conflict at a level no biological or artificial intelligence had ever achieved. "Full system integration," Parker murmured, his augmented neural interfaces connecting directly with the massive computational network. The room around him transformed. Holographic displays erupted with complex mathematical models that represented not just potential battle scenarios, but entire predictive universes of conflict. Where traditional military strategists looked at battles as linear progressions, Prometheus saw conflict as a multidimensional probability landscape. Each potential Zarkon movement was not just predicted, it was analyzed across thousands of potential outcomes, with computational paths that could anticipate strategic decisions before they were even conceived. Quantum entanglement stabilization at 99.7%, the system's AI announced. The breakthrough wasn't just in computational power, it was in the fundamental approach to strategic thinking. Traditional AI systems processed information. Prometheus didn't just process, it understood. It could simulate entire civilizational conflicts, running millions of scenario iterations in the time it took a human to blink. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, watching from a secondary monitoring station, couldn't help but marvel at the system's complexity. "It's not just predicting," she said to her colleague. "It's interpreting. It's understanding." The Zarkon believed their computational systems were superior. They were about to learn the difference between calculation and true intelligence. Prometheus began to generate what could only be described as living strategic models. Each potential Zarkon fleet movement was not just tracked, but understood in its full contextual complexity. The system could predict not just where an enemy fleet would move, but why they would make that specific decision. Military strategists had always talked about getting inside an enemy's decision-making process. Prometheus could literally simulate entire alternative universes of potential conflict, understanding the psychological and strategic motivations behind each potential move. Predictive modeling at maximum efficiency, the system reported. The quantum computational breakthrough meant that humanity was no longer just reacting to the Zarkon. They were anticipating, understanding, and ultimately controlling the entire strategic landscape of the conflict. Lieutenant Jake Wilson, connected to the system through a neural interface, could suddenly see the entire conflict as a living, breathing mathematical construct. Potential battle scenarios were not just numbers, but living probability landscapes that he could navigate with unprecedented clarity. "They don't even know we can see them coming," Wilson muttered. The most terrifying aspect for the Zarkon was that PROMETKEUS wasn't just a defensive system. It was a complete strategic ecosystem that could generate innovative tactical responses faster than any biological intelligence could comprehend. Dr. Parker watched as the system generated potential conflict scenarios. Each one was a masterpiece of strategic innovation, solutions that no traditional military strategist would have ever conceived. Complete strategic mapping complete, PROMETKEUS announced. The system had done more than predict the Zarkon's potential movements. It had generated a comprehensive strategic response that would dismantle their entire military approach, not through brute force, but through an almost elegant understanding of their computational and strategic limitations. Humanity had transformed warfare from a linear conflict into a multidimensional chess match where they could see every potential move before it was even conceived. The Zarkon thought they were fighting a war. They were about to learn they were participating in a carefully orchestrated demonstration of human computational superiority. And they had no idea what was coming. The United Earth Council chambers had been transformed into a war room that defied every traditional concept of diplomatic negotiation. Colonel Michael Thompson stood at the center, surrounded by holographic displays that showed the complete and total strategic demolition of the Zarkon Collective's military and social infrastructure. Admiral Krelix's holographic form flickered, a broken representation of what had once been an apparently invincible alien leadership. The crystalline being that had arrived weeks ago, with such absolute certainty, now looked like a fractured shadow of its former self. "Your surrender," Thompson said, his voice a precise instrument of strategic finality, "is not a negotiation. It is a mathematical certainty." The holographic displays told the story of humanity's comprehensive victory, not just a military triumph, but a complete dismantling of the Zarkon Collective's entire civilizational infrastructure. Psychological warfare had created internal fractures. Quantum computational systems had predicted and neutralized every potential strategic response. Genetic and technological adaptations had rendered the alien military capabilities obsolete. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stepped forward, holding a quantum data drive that contained the complete strategic analysis of the conflict. "Let me be absolutely clear," she said, her voice carrying the weight of scientific precision. "We did not just defeat you. We demonstrated the fundamental flaw in your entire approach to existence." The Zarkon leadership had been reduced to a computational shadow of its former self. Their rigid hierarchical structure, which had been their greatest strength for millennia, had become their ultimate weakness. Humanity had not just fought a war. They had conducted a complete systemic analysis and deconstruction of an entire alien civilization's approach to conflict, survival, and technological development. Lieutenant Jake Wilson brought up the final strategic mapping. Every Zarkon fleet movement, every potential counterattack, every hidden weapons system, all of it had been anticipated, understood, and neutralized before it could even be conceived. "Your mathematical models," Thompson continued, "predicted absolute victory. Our models showed something far more interesting, the complete possibility of your civilization's transformation. It was a critical distinction. Humanity was not seeking extermination. They were offering something far more dangerous, a complete reimagining of the Zarkon's entire approach to existence. The quantum computational system, PROMETKEUS, had done more than predict the conflict. It had generated comprehensive models for the Zarkon's potential survival and rehabilitation. Where other species might have sought total destruction, humans saw an opportunity for evolution. Dr. Sarah Goldstein, the psychological warfare specialist, presented the final analysis. "Your rigid computational approach to existence has been your greatest limitation," she explained. "We're offering you not just surrender, but transformation." The holographic displays began to show alternative models, how the Zarkon could rebuild, how their computational strengths could be redirected, how their species could adapt rather than be destroyed. Admiral Krelix's crystalline form seemed to struggle with the concept. Defeat had always meant total destruction in their galactic history. Humanity was offering something far more complex, a path to survival through complete systemic redesign. "You have a choice," Thompson said. "Surrender and transformation, or complete systemic elimination." The irony was not lost on anyone in the chamber. The species that had come to conquer was now being offered a chance at survival, not through mercy, but through a comprehensive understanding of their fundamental potential. Prometheus continued to generate potential outcome models. Each one showed not just the immediate conflict, but potential centuries of future development. Humanity was playing a game with generations as its chess pieces. Lieutenant Martinez, the genetically enhanced soldier, stepped forward. Her very existence was a demonstration of humanity's core strength, the ability to adapt, to transform, to see potential where others saw only limitation. "Your choice," she said simply. The chamber fell silent. The holographic displays continued their relentless demonstration of strategic superiority. Mathematical models, psychological profiles, technological capabilities, all pointed to one inevitable conclusion. The Zarkon had chosen war with humanity, and humanity had chosen to show them exactly what that meant. The unconditional surrender was not just a moment of military victory. It was a fundamental lesson in the nature of evolution, adaptation, and the true meaning of survival.